Dedicated to Mobu.
Any metropolis has organized crime. Whether there are 3 million people like Vancouver or 2.48 million people in Toronto, 5.5 million in the Greater Toronto Area, home to 8% of Canada's population, 30% of all recent immigrants and 20% of all immigrants, but Regina at only 190,000 ranks among those cities with the highest rates of homicide and violent offenses in the country. So what makes a tougher city? When North America is now being infiltrating by Eastern European mafia families that will kidnap your children and sell them into sexual slavery while at the same time marketing $32 billion worth of automatic weapons, missiles, and nuclear weapons that were hijacked out of the Ukraine in the 90s. If you want to own a street corner and run around with a sock full of crack rocks and a Glock 9 pistol and talk about being a tough guy, go for it. Globalization is the key word for real gangsters, and it ain't about colors. And as for having law enforcement wipe out gangster syndicates in one day, explain to me how come there are police no-go zones in major US cities then? With cameras on major corners now, satellite tracking systems out of space, and see. If you ever read about the Southside Indo gangs in Vancouver, you'll know that about 40 to 50 of them were killed in the 90s, by each other. So fuckface, if you think it's the life for you, go for it. You'll either end up addicted to crack or smack, and shit, we got plenty to go around. Being the major gateway to the Pacific, in jail or on the run, give or take 10 years of the high life, or dead. Unknown soldier. Introduction to historical background: the Hunkavual crime scene. Prior to events leading up to the end of the millennium. By Darcy John Bouchard. MMIX. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang but a whimper. T.S. Eliot, Hollow Men, 1925. The roots of Vancouver are based in logging and the founding of a large lumber mill, which gave birth to Gastown. Note: the oldest part of the city, this quaint area stretches east from Canada Place to Maple Tree Square along Vancouver's harbour. Subject of a massive restoration in the late 1960s, Gastown is now undergoing a new gentrification as old buildings are transformed into fashionable live-work spaces in the manner of New York lofts. The area is notable for its distinctive late Victorian architecture, and for some superbly appointed stores and restaurants. Harbour Centre, with its lookout observation deck, stands sentinel at Gastown's western edge. The Gastown steam clock sounds the Westminster chimes at the corner of Water and Cambie Streets. A statue of the city's founding father oversees Maple Tree Square. The name Gastown came into use because a Fraser River pilot turned saloonkeeper with the name Captain John Gassy Jack Dayton was in 1867 the first settler on the site from which Vancouver was to evolve. In Victorian times the term to gas referred to talking a lot. Captain Dayton had become famous for his saloon at Lucky, which meant grove of maple trees, close to Stamps Mill, near what is now the foot of Gore. He called it the Globe Saloon after his former saloon in New Westminster, a 12 by 24 board and batten shack. Today it's the intersection of Water and Carroll. A lonesome place when I came here first, surrounded by Indians. I care not to look outdoors after dark. There was a friend of mine about a mile distant found with his head cut in two. The Indian was caught and hanged. Gassy Jack. The settlement expanded rapidly in the 1880s into a metropolitan center following the arrival of the Transcontinental Railway in 1887. The Port of Vancouver became internationally significant as a node in the global trade network of the British Empire with the Canadian Pacific Railway, the combined steamship and railway thereof, shortening shipping times from the Orient to London. The port is now the busiest in Canada, and the fourth largest port, by tonnage, in North America. Prior to the 1980s, the economy of Vancouver had traditionally relied on British Columbia's resource sectors, forestry, mining, fishing, and agriculture. It has diversified over the past 30 years, however. Today its second largest industry, after forestry, is tourism, and it has become the third largest film production center in North America after Los Angeles and New York City. Property crime is by far the biggest crime threat in Vancouver. Property crime is predominantly related to habitual drug users and homeless persons who commit crime to fund their addictions. A majority of the property crime is nonviolent and includes theft from automobiles, shoplifting, and tourist-related crime. Known crime groups in Vancouver include Asian street gangs, Aboriginal street gangs, motorcycle gangs, black street gangs, Indo-Canadian street gangs, Hispanic street gangs, and multicultural street gangs. Italian crime syndicates and various Eastern European bratwursts are also known to be active in the Lower Mainland. According to law enforcement agencies, the most powerful of these crime groups in Vancouver are the motorcycle gangs, Asian street gangs, and Indo-Canadian street gangs. However, in recent years, multicultural street gangs have grown significantly in power and prominence, and have attained much media attention due to their involvement in numerous shootings and slayings throughout the city. Since 1997, nearly 450 gangsters have been killed there. The surge in shootings is directly related to a crackdown on gangs in Mexico and the United States, says Pat Fogarty, a senior officer in the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. Recent arrests by the three countries' police forces have disrupted a Mexican-run cocaine distribution chain, leaving Vancouver's street dealers fighting to secure their supplies. The price goes up and the guns come out, says Fogarty. Vancouver has become a distribution hub in a global drugs trade stretching to Asia and Europe. Local gangs ship out cannabis, amphetamines, and ecstasy made in BC, importing cocaine, heroin and guns for the Canadian market. Around 135 gangs are thought to be fighting over a business worth an estimated $7 billion, $6.2 billion, a year. As it prepares to host the Olympic Games in 2010, the city of Vancouver, British Columbia, is struggling with a surge in violent crime. Homicide investigators say that January alone saw 17 fatal shootings, with 58 murders in 2008 and 41 in 2007. RCMP Superintendent Pat Fogarty said a shortage of drugs is responsible, citing a 67% increase in cocaine prices to $39,000 per kilogram. He said, "People are nervous, and so are the police. The public is outraged. The government is outraged." Note: while campaigning for an election on May 12 in which he was too easily re-elected, Gordon Campbell, the Premier of British Columbia, BC, province, had a personal brush with violent crime. As he was being interviewed by a reporter at a Vancouver hotel, a woman with a gun ran by, having robbed a jeweler. The Premier's bodyguard hustled him to safety and the robber was later arrested. But the incident should have reminded Campbell that crime worries voters almost as much as the recession. Also note: throughout 2008, the U.S. consulate has been the focus of a number of demonstrations covering a wide range of issues usually associated with socially left advocates, including anti-U.S. foreign policy, anti-war, and anti-2010 Olympics. Larger demonstrations and those not aimed at the U.S. consulate generally occur at the Vancouver Art Gallery and may proceed past the U.S. consulate, 5 blocks away. All demonstrations have been peaceful and have been met by a well-organized police response. Peter Van Loan, Public Safety Minister, said Canada's violence is at its worst in Vancouver, a city he calls the country's gang capital. Prime Minister Stephen Harper visited the area last month, proposing stiffer sentences for gang killings. In the first quarter of 2009, gang violence in Metro Vancouver increased. Since January, there were 17 fatal shootings in the region. In comparison, Toronto reported 11 homicides in 2009. Both local and federal authorities are currently working to address the gang situation before the 2010 Winter Olympics. The 1960s was a social residue decade from idiosyncrasies and values derived from the 1950s American dream concept that invoked individual economic prosperity, well-being in freedom and abundance, though never explained at whose expense but not necessarily for all, in a society wherein blacks, Native Americans, Mexicans, and others were racially segregated. In comparison with present-day society, the 50s and 60s generations were naive if not goofy, thus easy to manipulate mentally through movies, television, and even radio. A very important and popular communication medium. During the 1950s and beyond, it was within this social context that a sophisticated mass media brainwashing of society begun to reach into the intimacy of the average home via television, with an unprecedented message urging people to become concerned with the civil rights of blacks and queers only. Mexicans and Native Americans were racially insulted and denigrated in television and movies, in parallel with the presentation of blacks in highly positive and advantageous ways. This has lasted for 40 years every day and can be attributed as the root of racist attitudes towards those non-white ethnic nations. Those and other U.S. racial groups were useless at that time to the elite's agenda for a new world order, whereas queers and blacks were very convenient according to their plans nowadays in advanced stages with the election of House Negro Barack Obama as President of the U.S. One important element in the integration process of blacks into this bankers system was the encouragement of interracial sex between black men and white women. Starting in 1969, through subliminal yet blatant television messages even at prime time broadcasting hours, adult women and young girls were told to get it on, have sex with blacks, and that it would be racist if they didn't. This brainwashing tactic. The Chinese are one of the largest minority groups in Canada. They have the second lowest rate of mixed unions at 16% of the married population. South Asians have the lowest rate at 13%. Madeleine Kalbach, a University of Calgary sociologist and expert in ethnic intermarriage, explains that while Asians have a large population in Canada, they are relatively recent immigrants. Kalbach explains that foreign-born, first-generation immigrants are more likely to have spouses of the same background, while the second generation begins to have mixed marriages. The third generation is the key to see who will intermarry. Among Asians in Canada, the third generation is very small, but as this number grows, so will mixed marriages. She notes that men are more likely to marry outside their race, and prestige could be a factor. She also says divorced men are more likely to enter into a mixed marriage. Among the first arrivals flooding into sleepy Fort Victoria when word of rich strikes on the Fraser River reached San Francisco in 1858 was a large contingent of Jews from the California gold fields. The first year, the Jewish immigrants had established some 70 money-handling businesses to deprive the poor goy who worked hard of their hard-earned cash. By the mid-1860s, Victoria's Jewish population reached about 250. Note when the city's first synagogue, Temple Emmanuel, was consecrated in 1863, more than half of the building fund contributors were non-Jew Freemasons and Oddfellows. Further, many Victoria Jewish businessmen were elected to important civic and political positions. American stampeders quickly overwhelmed the tiny British outpost, and Fort Victoria's population exploded as an estimated 30,000 prospectors and camp followers passed through. The Asiatics have come into British Columbia in such numbers that there are Hindu temples in Victoria and in Vancouver. The Hindus are a source of trouble. They are not suited to the country. They are immoral and quarrelsome and have not the stamina enough to become good workers. Some of them, however, make money. There are several real estate officers here conducted by Hindus, who are well enough off to keep automobiles. This very success constitutes a danger. Mayor Beckwith of Victoria. From the very beginning, Sikhs soon realized that in this new and strange world with its hostile government they would have no one to rely upon for support other than themselves. The community remained very tight-knit from its very beginning. When the first Sikh died in 1907, the community gathered to cremate the body as was their custom, except there were no crematoriums. Note: Maharaja Ranjit Singh died, in 1839, after a reign of nearly 40 years, leaving 7 sons by different queens. He was cremated. His ceremony was performed by both Sikh and Hindu priests. His wife Maharani Madhav Devi Sahiba, the Princess of Kangra, daughter of Maharaja Sansar Chand, the Empress of Punjab, committed sati with Ranjit's body as Ranjit's head lay in her lap. Some of the other wives also joined her and committed sati, a funeral practice among some Hindu communities in which a recently widowed woman would either voluntarily or by use of force and coercion immolate herself on her husband's funeral pyre. This practice is now rare and outlawed in modern India. The mayor of Vancouver refused to allow any cremation within the city limits. Christian missionaries were trying to force the idea of burial while at the same time not allowing any Sikh to be buried in any white man's graveyard. In the middle of the night, Sikhs took the body to a distant forest to carry out their religious services and cremate the body in the morning. This made the community realize that they needed to have their own place of worship where they could carry on their religious ceremonies and customs, which are such an integral part of being a Sikh. The first Gurdwara founded in North America was the Vancouver Sikh Temple on West 2nd Avenue, opened on January 19, 1908. In 1912 the Victoria Temple was built. 2 more Gurdwaras were built that same year in Abbotsford and New Westminster. The Mayo Lumber Company, founded by Mayo Singh, built a Gurdwara on Vancouver Island in 1918. The right to die. A young widow's ritual self-immolation upon her husband's funeral pyre. The burning of wives on the funeral pyres of their husbands, widow burning, commonly known as sati, sati in English, has been practiced in India, considered to be the world's largest democracy, since at least the 4th century BCE, when it was first recorded in Greek accounts. The original meaning of the Sanskrit word sati was simply faithful wife. It was banned by British colonial law in 1829-30 but survived in the native Indian states until the late 1880s, when it was effectively eradicated, although extremely rare cases persisted into the early 20th century. Note: A Man Called Horse by Dorothy M. Johnson is a story about an Englishman captured by Crow Indians. The first real sign of the man is that he will not go lower than the dog in the tribe's social condition, therefore, he is called horse by his captors. The theme of the story is respect, respect for others but, most importantly, respect for yourself. Greasy Hand had no patience for him as he was her slave, but after her son died, leaving her alone with no one to care, she humbles herself to bequest of Horse to care for her in her old age. The reader is awed as the man called Horse rises in prominence amongst their community, quick becoming a great and mighty man of renown. Also note: the Sati Prevention Bill, a draconian piece of legislation, openly formulated to stifle dissenting opinion and compel mass obedience, has been stirring doubts even among the community of women's rights activists who were the first to clamor for harsher anti-Sati measures. Indian Parliament on December 15, 1987 passed the Sati Prevention Bill, which mandates 1 to 5 years imprisonment for any woman who attempts sati, the death penalty or life imprisonment for abetment of sati, 1 to 7 years imprisonment for glorification of sati, and suspension of civic rights of anyone convicted of abetting or glorifying sati, i.e. disqualification from holding any public office. Most disturbing of all, the bill contains a special provision so that the burden of proof is shifted from the accusers to the person accused. Since India's independence in 1947, or more precisely since 1943, there has been a spectacular revival of the phenomenon in 4 northern Indian states, Bihar, Uttar Pradesh, Madhya Pradesh, and especially Rajasthan, a former stronghold of sati. Although the number of women who have committed sati since that date likely does not exceed 40, with 30 in Rajasthan alone, an infinitesimal percentage of the female population, the reactivation of the practice has had considerable social and political impact, especially in the case of the De Orla affair, the burning of a young Rajput widow named Rup Kanwar, age 18, in Rajasthan in September 1987. Roop Kanwar was a devout Hindu, by Indian standards, well educated and had been married to Mal Singh, only 8 months when Mal abruptly took ill and died. She is reported to have been engaged in her daily prayers at the moment when her husband's lifeless body was brought before her. With no outward show of sorrow, she completed her prayers before calmly revealing her intention to grieving family members, to unite her soul with that of her husband's. That September morning, Roop Kanwar slowly changed into her bridal finery and toured Orla village for the last time, walking at the head of her own funeral procession. In her hands she held a coconut, symbol of life. For 15 minutes, she circumambulated the pyre. We kept telling her that it was getting late and the police might arrive, but she signaled us to be patient. Then she climbed onto the pyre and her husband's head was laid in her lap. A witness. Awed by Roop Kanwar's courage and conviction, hundreds of her friends and neighbors paid reverence and stood back as Mal Singh's 15-year-old younger brother stepped forward to light the pyre. According to witnesses, her expression remained serene even as flames were enveloping her. Within hours, it was all over. Documented abuses allege, in some instances, widows were to have been forced either physically or by social pressure to mount their husband's funeral pyre. The late 17th century the French traveller, François Berny witnessed the burning of a 12-year-old widow from Lahore who trembled and wept so vigorously that she had to be bound to finish the matter and never be born again into the impure female sex. Widow burning was indigenous to India but belonged to the same pre-Aryan wild clans and tribes. The Norsemen, which often cremated their dead in ship burials, thrall maidens, not slaves nor captives but girls of good standing in the community, not unlike Vestals in regards of respect within the community, were often gang-raped and then sent to a fiery death along with their dead chieftains as those that had introduced human sacrifice to propitiate bloodthirsty deities, as well as other equally loathsome rituals, into the Hindu canon of practice. Following the same line of argumentation, the remarkable fact that neither the Vedas, the sacred revelation of ancient Brahmanism, nor such authoritative treatises on Dharma as the laws of Manu ever mention widow burning, is taken as evidence for the repression of this barbaric custom by a civilized Aryan society, in which the widow was enjoined either to lead an ascetic life for the rest of her days or, if she had had no male issue, to cohabit with her husband's younger brother until she begot. 1. Whore, a commonplace term of abuse for widows. Although widow remarriage has been authorized by law since as early as 1856, it was and still is rarely resorted to among higher or middle castes, or among groups that follow a strategy of embracing high caste values and practices to collectively uplift themselves in the social hierarchy. An object of universal repugnance, the widow is required to lead a life of asceticism and self-mortification. In the higher castes, her head is shaved, and she is deprived of all finery, every pleasure, and every comfort. Because she is the bearer of misfortune and impurity, she is excluded from domestic festivities, and even from the wedding of her own children. The widow has eaten her husband, caused his death through her misconduct in previous births or in this life. Among the Hindus who bury their dead, the cruel custom of widows burying themselves alive with the bodies of their husbands, exists only in this division of the working caste, and is confined moreover to the country of Orissa and that of the Marathas. When the widow of a Juji has signified her intention to bury herself with her deceased husband, her family dig a grave from 6 to 8 feet deep, into which the body of the husband is let down, and placed sitting with the hands joined. If the person have died near the Ganges, the grave is dug by the side of the river, at the bottom of which they spread a new cloth, and on it lay the dead body. The widow then approaches the grave, escorted as in the ceremonies which we have already described by a solemn procession. She bathes before the public without giving occasion to the slightest scandal, being already considered, from the sanctity of the death she has chosen, as a supernatural being. At the edge of the grave she listens to the pious exhortations of the Brahmins who accompany her, gives them her jewels, and after placing upon her head a kutjuri kikuri or pot filled with rice, plantains, betel, and water, makes her farewell salutations to the assistants with her hands joined. She descends into the grave, the pit that is to swallow her up, by a ladder of bamboo which is instantly drawn up again. In this living tomb she sits down, and places the head of her deceased husband on her knee, having a lamp near her. At that moment all the instruments hired for the ceremony are heard, and the priest, not a Brahmin, sits by the side of the grave, and repeats certain ceremonies, while the friends of the deceased walk round the grave several times repeating incantations. The friends cast various offering into the grave, the son also casts a new garment into the grave, with flowers, sandalwood, and sea, after which the relations throw such quantities of earth upon the unfortunate widow, till it has risen as high as her shoulders, when the relations throw earth as fast as possible, till they have raised a mound of earth on the grave that she is soon suffocated and interred. Then they treat it down with their feet and thus bury this miserable wretch alive. The preparations for this ceremony are horrid, but it does not appear that the sufferings of the unhappy victim are of long duration. Shouldst thou wish to play the game of love, come unto my path with thy head on thy palm. And, once you step onto this path, you may well give up thy head, rather than the cause. Guru Nanak Dev Ji, the first of the 10 Sikh Gurus. Baba Deep Singh continued to fight after having been decapitated, slaying his enemies with his head in one hand and his sword in the other. Revered among Sikhs as one of the most hallowed martyrs in Sikhism and as a highly religious person, he is remembered for his sacrifice and devotion to the teachings of the Sikh Gurus. Sikhs believe that all subsequent Gurus possessed Guru Nanak's divinity and religious authority. There is no Hindu, there is no Muslim, in Punjabi, Anki Hind Anki Musulm. Almighty is everywhere. He is in the soul of everyone. The universe is the will of the Almighty. God is the absolute truth, he cannot be bound by a particular religion. If one looks in himself with deep insight and the condensed state of mind, this truth will be revealed itself. It was from this moment that Guru Nanak would begin to spread the teachings of what was then the beginning of Sikhism. Pakistan is a hostile place for anyone who is not a Sunni Muslim. Both Hindus and Christians are 1.5 to 2% respectively of the population of Pakistan. At the time of partition in 1947, the percentage of Hindus and Sikhs was around 30% and has declined to what it is now. In the past 4 years, some 5,000 Hindus may have crossed over from Pakistan into India, never to return. It has not been easy abandoning their homes, sometimes even their families, but they say they had no choice, they had to flee the Taliban. Ranaram, who used to live in the Rahimyar district of Pakistan's Punjab, says he fell prey to the Taliban. His wife was kidnapped, raped and forcibly converted to Islam. His 2 daughters were also forcibly converted. Ranaram, too, had to accept Islam for fear of his life. He thought it best to flee with his 2 daughters, his wife was untraceable. Dung Aram, another migrant, says atrocities against Hindus in Pakistan have increased in the past 2 years after the ouster of Musharraf. We won't get permanent jobs unless we convert to Islam. Hindu Singh Soda, president of Seemant Lok Sangathan, a group working for the refugees in Barmer and Jais Almer, says there's unfortunately no proper refugee policy in India even though people from Pakistan reach here in large numbers. Tibetans, in India, do not have feelings for the land, busy enjoying India, buying basic necessities with subsidies, living happy lives with no sign of any attempt from their side to get back their land. All Tibetan markets in India smuggle Chinese goods to India illegally and make fortunes by selling them with no tax paid to authorities. Although today there are few Sikhs in Pakistan, the country has a significant place in Sikhism. Guru Nanak, the founder of Sikhism, was born in present-day Pakistan, and it is said he received his message near Lahore. Therefore, the religion actually originated in Pakistan. Most of Sikhism's holy sites are located in Pakistan. In order to rally people, governments need enemies. They want us to be afraid, to hate, so we will rally behind them. And if they do not have a real enemy, they will invent one in order to mobilize us. Thich Nhat Hanh. After the Cultural Revolution of the mid-1960s, after Mao Zedong's death in 1976, many Red Guards were sent to re-education prison camps around the city of Canton, now called Guangzhou, where they were tortured and starved. Supposedly, the few maps allowed by the repressive communist government showed these detention camps as a big circle, and Canton is sometimes called the Big City. The purged Red Guards were treated like hardened criminals and were constantly abused by the People's Liberation Army. Note: the People's Liberation Army, PLA, is the unified military organization of all land, sea, and air forces of the People's Republic of China. The PLA was established on August 1, 1927 as the military arm of the Communist Party of China, CCP. The People's Liberation Army insignia consists of a roundel with a red star bearing the Chinese characters 481 referring to August 1, 1927, the date of the first major Kuomintang communist engagement of the Chinese Civil War, the Nanchang Uprising. It is regarded as the first action fought against the Kuomintang, KMT, or Nationalist Party, in order to counter the anti-communist purges by the Nationalist Party of China. The PLA is the world's largest military force, with approximately 3 million members, and has the world's largest, active, standing army, with approximately 2.25 million members. Military service is compulsory, in theory, for all men who attain the age of 18, women may register for duty in the medical, veterinary, and other technical services. President Hu Jintao has defined the missions of the PLA as, consolidate the ruling status of the Communist Party, help ensure China's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and domestic security in order to continue national development, safeguard China's expanding national interests, help maintain world peace. Political prisoners in that period were subjected to re-education which amounted to brainwashing or worse. Having been through this degradation and having military training, they have a fearsome reputation. Reportedly between 1969 and 1975 some of these prisoners escaped and fled to Hong Kong, where they obtained falsified documents, from where they were admitted to Canada and the United States as political refugees, or more often, were smuggled in illegally. Arriving in several Chinatowns, including Vancouver, Toronto, New York City, coming to police attention in 1987 in Vancouver. The Big Circle Boys are extremely mobile, having a national network in major cities in Canada and the United States. They are difficult to detect because they work in small cells, which are next to impossible to infiltrate. In Hong Kong and China, they are called Daihinjie. The Big Circle Boys in Hong Kong initiated a series of violent armed robberies in the mid-1970s, specializing in robbing couriers and other high-cash targets. The Big Circle Boys are not one unified gang. The label was coined to refer to all gangs of mainland Chinese origin, but there is now a second generation of these gangs, some of whom have never seen China. There were about 100 members of the Big Circle Boys in Canada, mostly in Vancouver and Toronto. Unlike most Asian youth gangs, the Big Circle Boys are older men, perhaps in their 30s, who may have military training, and speak Cantonese. The Big Circle Boys have specialized in transporting illegal aliens, a profession referred to as snakeheads. Although the Big Circle Boys may call themselves sewer rats, Big Circle Boys also smuggle heroin to the US via Vancouver or Toronto and have been known to traffic in arms, as well as robberies and kidnapping. Here are some of the criminal activities associated with Asian organized crime: heroin from the Golden Triangle of Southeast Asia, cocaine and other drugs, including ecstasy and BC-grown marijuana. Loan sharks often frequent casinos, where they charge exorbitant interest rates for loans to pay gambling debts. Unpaid loans result in violence and drive-by shootings to force repayment. Shipping stolen vehicles overseas is one of the most profitable crimes for Asian organized crime groups. Because theft rings only need to pay the cost of stealing and shipping, generally less than 10% of a vehicle's value. Stolen vehicles are usually shipped in containers and accompanied by false documentation. Many people, too, from Southeast Asia agree to pay $45,000 or more to be smuggled into Canada, only to be exploited as prostitutes or forced into labor to pay off their debts. they are also susceptible to robbery from gangs as their lack of immigration papers makes them fearful of reporting crimes against them. Some become drug couriers and others have serious criminal records before coming to Canada. Separated from the rest of the world by the Arctic, Pacific, and Atlantic Oceans, Canada shares a border with only one country, the United States. Non-American tourists arrive in this country at international airports. Interdiction there would be slightly more difficult but still within the power of a government that professed to uphold national sovereignty. Note the purpose of interdiction is to delay, disrupt, or destroy enemy forces or supplies en route to the battle area. A distinction is often made between strategic and tactical interdiction. The former refers to operations whose effects are broad and long-term. Tactical operations are designed to affect events rapidly and in a localized area. Federal Environment Minister David Anderson rejects the assertion that Canada's immigration laws are lax. Yet he insists there is little that can be done to secure the borders. The trouble is to prevent illegals from coming into Canada we would have to essentially destroy Victoria's tourism trade. We have limits as to what we can do regarding the 20 million plus legal visits to Canada annually. How's that for a stirring motto? Millions for tourism, not 1 cent for defense. Loan Shark Betty Yan aka Betty the Loan Shark Yan, Big Sister Betty, Betty Tung Shi Yan was the mother of a 7-year-old boy and a 13-year-old girl. On paper, she was married to Chek Wei Kwan, known to police. The Richmond resident was born on November 7, 1969, in Guangdong, China. She slipped into Canada as a refugee via Bangkok, Thailand, sometime in the late 1980s and was quickly on the radar of Asian organized crime investigators, as she played her guangzai, the Chinese word for connections, to entrench herself in BC's Chinese underworld. Claiming that her father was an officer with China's Public Security Bureau. Betty Yan also ingratiated her with Canadian police officers, offering inside information on triads. Note: Richmond's population as of January 1, 2008 was 188,100. It is the fourth largest city in British Columbia, after Vancouver, 605,891, Surrey, 420,900, and Burnaby, 193,954. Richmond has an immigrant population of 59%, the highest in Canada. More than half of its population is of Asian descent, many of whom immigrated in the early 1990s, most of them from Hong Kong, Taiwan, and mainland China. Other Asian Canadians in Richmond include Indo-Canadians, Filipino Canadians, and Japanese Canadians. Richmond was ranked as the third safest city in British Columbia for 2002. Betty Yan was present when a loan shark nicknamed Pretty Boy Men was gunned down in a Richmond restaurant in 1988. She was also present at the assassinations of underworld figure Tommy Wong. The Rich and the Dead. A chronology of crime throughout Greater Vancouver, until the end of the millennium and commencement of the 21st century. Outline following. Introducing Bindy Johul and Baljit Battur. The tragic romance of Peter Gill and Gillian. Guess. The late 1990s, the United Nations gang and Clayton Roueche, the elite. Guess first hearing, no remorse. No remorse, guess first hearing, continued. The Indo-Canadian Mafia. The elite and murder for hire, crime family unravels, Derek Chand Shankar. Tara Singh Hare, martyr. The Hells Angels. Bindy Johul shot dead for $20,000. Betty Yan and the New Chinese Boat People. Introducing the Red Scorpions and the Bacon Brothers. Thus ends the 20th century, in Hunkoval. Throughout the 1990s, Bhupinder Bindy Johul ran the largest and most successful Indo-Canadian criminal organization in British Columbia. His criminal endeavors included the illicit narcotics trade, fraud, contract murder, money laundering, extortion and racketeering. The Johul organization's annual earnings were between $3 million to $4 million at the time of his murder. Johul's activities brought his organization into direct confrontation with the Chinese criminal organization, the Lotus Triads. In the mid-1990s, Johul would often be on primetime news exchanging threats with rival mobsters. They were small-time gangsters who sold drugs at schools and nightclubs. But with muscle, firepower, and wads of cash, they moved about like big guys who ran the city. Note: the murder of self-admitted drug dealer Bindy Johul, 27, at the Palladium nightclub and in the presence of more than 300 people over 6 months ago is not yet solved. People are too scared to talk, says a police official. He had crossed too many paths and angered too many people. Law enforcement insiders believe the arrests could lead to the unraveling of the Johul murder conspiracy. Police spokesperson Sergeant Patrick Convey of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police said on June 23 that some of the mobsters were arrested in Vancouver and others were nabbed in Hong Kong. It was a big Asian crime conspiracy, he said, adding that many police organizations are involved in the ongoing investigation in Hong Kong and other parts of Asia. Indo-Canadian groups as well as those with roots in Trinidad and Guyana are used to conduct smaller level but extensive cocaine and heroin businesses here, sources said. To many young people in the immigrant community who feel that Canadian society does not give them enough chance to succeed, joining gangsters is an exercise in building their self-esteem, said one source asking for anonymity. Why do you think Bindy Johul was a hero to many young Indo-Canadians? He asked. His legend had spread wide in the past few years among Indians not only here but also in Toronto and Montreal, New York, and San Francisco. He stood up to his school principals, he beat up those who called him racial names, and he was making a lot of money even though he was in his mid-20s. He drove fancy cars, he had girls falling all over him. Johul was acquitted in a double murder case of the Dosanja brothers, alleged drug dealers, 4 years ago, and then gone on to rapidly build a reputation as a ruthless drug dealer. His entanglement with the cocaine trade allegedly brought him into direct confrontation with the rival Lotus gang who had put up a $250,000 price tag on his head. Several of Johul's friends who insisted on anonymity said he had grown stoical and prepared for his death, following relentless threats by rivals against him and his family members, and the successful attempts on the lives of his closest friends and associates. Peter Gill, also known as Preet Sarbjit Gill, and his brother-in-law ran a gang involved in the drug trade in Vancouver. Police believe that in February 1994, the gang lured Ginger Dosanja, 26, to a dark alley, where they murdered him with machine guns. 2 months later, on April 19, 1994, this gang allegedly also murdered Dosanja's brother Ranjit, Ron, Dosanja, fatally shot at intersection of Kingsway and Fraser in southeast Vancouver, by a killer who pulls up beside him and fires high-powered rifle. April 24, 1994 Bindy Johul's neighbor, Glenn Olson, is walking a dog when he is shot dead. Police suspect he was mistaken for Johul by associates of Ron Dosanja. Battur says Kun was the likely shooter. The murders had received a lot of publicity and had set off a gang war in the Vancouver area. After a year of investigation of the murder, the police had still not made any arrests. The public became outraged and demanded justice. Arrests were finally made. The police and the Crown desperately wanted a conviction to put an end to the gang warfare and the negative publicity the case had generated. Glenn Olson was not an immigrant. His dad was white and his mom was a native of Yukon. He was a nice guy and got shot by accident. 2. Gillian guess Peter Gill was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. 5 of his associates, Bhupinder Johul, Rajinder Kumar Benji, Michael Kent Bude, Ho Sik, Phil, Kim, and Sun News Lal were tried with him on the murder charges. The trial began on February 27, 1995 and lasted 8 months. It was one of the longest, most expensive, and most complicated trials in British Columbia history. Gillian Guess was selected to serve as a juror for the murder trial. During the trial, Guess and Gill, one of the defendants, started a relationship that became sexual. Note: a 42-year-old single mother of 2 who was pursuing a master's degree prior to the onset of the trial, Guess was forced to put her life on hold for 9 months and take a weekend job as a police counselor for the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP, to support her family. For the first 3 months of the case, Guess and the other jurors were forced to wait on hold at home each day, waiting for a call from the court that pre-trial argument had ended. It wasn't until April 1995 that the first evidence was finally presented to the jurors. During the trial, the prosecution twice tried to have Guess removed from the jury, once for improper eye contact with one of the defendants, Peter Gill, and once for an alleged conversation she had with one of the attorneys involved in the case. In both instances, the judge ruled that Guess should remain on the jury and did not advise Guess or any of the other jurors that Guess' behavior had been questioned. Finally, in October 1995, after 3 months of waiting through pre-trial arguments and 6 months of listening to evidence, the jurors began their deliberations. They were sequestered and deliberated for 7 days and 7 nights. The 12-member jury voted unanimously to acquit all the defendants on all of the charges. Ms. Guess and the other jurors were not instructed not to have contact with the defendants. The prosecution and the judge were aware during the trial of the relationship between Ms. Guess and Mr. Gill. Guess was quickly attracted to Gill, who was a man 10 years younger than she. She would stare at him, and according to court clerk Emma Hyde, she would flip her hair and look seductive. Later Gill approached Guess at McDonald's and told her he was innocent of the charges. Sometime later the two started to flirt outside the courtroom. Gill pursued the relationship. Gill and Guess had intimate conversation and kissed in Stanley Park. The relationship became sexual. My attraction to him was a complete intoxication. I got to the point where I couldn't see straight. It just became an obsession. Ms. Guess court officers informed the judge of the inappropriate behavior, and the Honorable Judge Braidwood warned Peter Gill about his behavior, but he never talked to Gillian Guess. The relationship continued, and when Gillian Guess asked Peter Gill if she should find a way to get off the jury, he told her to stay. He also told her to convict 2 of his CO defendants, but not him. June 10, 1995. The charred body of Peter Manjit Dosanjh is found in a stolen van set afire in a delta field. Police say the death is linked to the drug underworld note. As of 2005, Delta's population was 102,655, about 23% are visible minorities, of which there are approximately 12,000 South Asians and 5,400 Chinese Canadians. There are also about 1,400 Aboriginal peoples, some from the Tsawwassen Indian Band, who still hold traditional lands on the Tsawwassen Indian Reserve as well as the Howlitsum First Nation, at the mouth of the Fraser River. Emma Hyde, the court clerk at the trial, described the eye contact between Guess and Gill as prolonged, more captivating than a normal look. Hyde described Guess' body language, as she sat in the front row of the juror's box, as almost seductive. She'd smile almost coyly, said Hyde, now a Vancouver police officer. She would flip her hair and look seductive is the best way to put it. The looks were a topic of conversation among court staff. There were a number of people who spoke to me about it, said Hyde. I had concerns about how it looked to people coming into the courtroom. Hyde said she and Deputy Sheriff Jean Walsh twice approached Justice Tom Braidwood in his office with their concerns. With the jury outside the courtroom, Braidwood warned the accused about making contact with the jurors. Hyde said that seemed to stop the flirting for a couple of weeks. She didn't go back to the judge to report the renewed flirting. The issue was never raised in court again, asked Roueche. No, she replied. Court reporter Spencer Charis said he caught Gill and Guess smiling at each other a few times. Roueche challenged Charis to explain his statement at the preliminary hearing that Guess appeared dramatic. She wore brilliant, dramatic colors, tight-fitting miniskirts and high heels, said Charis. She was dramatic. When Roueche suggested Guess' dress was typical summer attire, Charis responded, she was consistently dramatic, no matter what the weather was. I've worked in many jury trials and I hadn't seen that before. Spencer Charist. Deputy Sheriff Sonny Pun was one of 6 court officers who also testified they saw Guess and Gill flirting with each other during the 1995 trial. Most of the witnesses so far have said they saw Gill writing in a diary. 4 deputy sheriffs took the witness stand, each describing the extraordinary behavior they saw going on between Guess and accused murderer Peter Gill. Daniel Ames said he and his fellow deputy sheriff secretly referred to Guess as Elvira or the Dragon Lady. Responding to questions by defense counsel Marilyn Sanford, Ames admitted he mentioned the nicknames in a February 1996 interview with an RCMP officer investigating the obstruction allegation against Guess, who had a part-time job as a victims counselor for the North Vancouver RCMP. Did other jurors have nicknames? Asked Sanford. No, he replied. Ames said he noticed regular eye contact between Guess, who sat in the front row of the juror's box, and Gill. He also described as odd Guess' manner of entering the courtroom, saying she often waited a moment after the juror ahead of her walked in to make an entrance, of sorts. Ames said he noticed on a number of occasions that Gill would write something in his diary, then nudge fellow accused Mike Boudet and show him his diary. Boudet and Gill would then snicker and Boudet would look up at Guess and smile, all while the murder trial was going on in front of them. Deputy Sheriff Don Cox testified that Guess' attire and habits distracted her from her main duties of scanning the courtroom for possible security problems in the highly charged murder trial. Cox said Guess wore provocative clothing, including a see-through blouse, short skirts and red high heels, and on 2 or 3 occasions Guess put her foot up on the low divider in front of the juror's box and left it there for 10 to 15 seconds. I didn't feel it was proper, she said. Cox said the courtroom interaction between Guess and Gill was so obviously flirtatious that Gill's wife Gogo, a sister of fellow accused Bindy Johul, complained to her about them. Cox said she went to her superior twice with her concerns about the pair's behavior. She also said she was present July 11 when Justice Tom Braidwood cautioned the 6 accused about making contact with jurors following a lunchtime incident at Robson Square, in which Gill and Guess allegedly smiled at each other. Interaction between Guess and Gill sort of cooled off after that, for about a month, said Cox. Then it commenced again. Deputy Sheriff Roger Phillips, who said he noticed the interaction between the two, said Guess complained to his superior about him and a fellow deputy. She felt that we were watching her, said Phillips, adding that he and his colleague were actually watching a juror behind Guess who appeared to be nodding off. The Crown was furious. They had expended a lot of time and money into getting a conviction, and, along with the police, widely criticized the jury's verdict in Regina v. Johul. Guess was interviewed by a local television station, defending the jury's verdict and criticized the weak case that the prosecution had presented. Guess could not discuss the specifics of jury room deliberations, as this is prohibited under Canadian law. She said the Crown should never have brought the case against the defendants based on such flimsy evidence. She strongly criticized the government for persecuting innocent people. Now the Crown had a target for their fury, and the witch hunt began. They already had a suspicion that Guess had engaged in improper eye contact with ex-defendant Peter Gill. They soon discovered that Guess and Gill had met about a week after the trial was over and began to date. August 24, 1995, Chi Ma-In-Fur is shot about 1 a.m. after leaving the Zodiac karaoke bar in Richmond, along with associate Robbie Candela. He survives and later suspects Candela was in on the shooting. October 11, 1995. Suspected drug dealer Paul Jabal, 22, dies after being found at Southeast Marine Drive and Elliott in Vancouver with gunshot wounds. Sources say Jabal was killed after becoming addicted to his own product, reducing his profits from illegal drug sales. In December 1995, Guess was arrested for questioning, ironically, by one of her former fellow employees from the RCMP. She admitted to the police she had been in an intimate relationship with Gill that began after the end of the trial. She was released after several hours of interrogation. The Crown then launched a full-scale investigation of Guess, tapping her phone. They tapped the phones of her friends and family, they harassed and investigated her family and friends and tried to terrorize and intimidate Guess. They even put a hidden recording device in her bedroom. After a 3-month investigation, Guess was arrested and charged with obstruction of justice on May 13, 1996. Ironically, the same day another juror, Laura Cryho, was seated to serve on the jury in Colorado, which led to her malicious prosecution. Defense lawyer Peter Ritchie accused the Crown of being in a rush to justice and said he needed more time to talk with his client and to review extensive police notes. But Judge Elizabeth Arnold denied Ritchie's application for an adjournment, saying the police evidence will not be called until late in the trial and that other issues can be dealt with in a voir dire, a trial within a trial. Crown Counsel Joe Bellows intends to call wiretap evidence of conversations recorded at the home of Guess and her sister. Ritchie called the operation massive and said he needs time to advise his client. Ritchie repeatedly suggested that the Crown was guilty of not properly disclosing relevant information and not fully outlining charges it is bringing against Guess. But Bellows said the Crown will show that Guess had a personal relationship with Peter Gill while he was on trial for murder. Guess had an affair with Gill while he was out on bail during the 8-month trial. When the trial ended, Guess publicly criticized police for their handling of the case. Prosecutor Bellows said the fact Guess had a relationship with Gill will be sufficient proof that she violated the juror's oath to be impartial. But Ritchie called the oath vague and imprecise. He said the Crown's indictment against Guess amounted to a mere theory rather than a charge. We seem to be thrusting quickly to a trial in this matter, the defense lawyer said. It leaves me in a state of perplexity as to how I'm going to defend my client. Ritchie added that Guess, who currently has 2 children and no source of income, would like to get the trial underway but must first be fully aware of what defense strategies she can mount. Guess, who wore a cream suit with high-heeled shoes, fiddled with beads and a necklace during the day and often walked up to talk with Ritchie. At one point, when the judge told her she would be compelled to decide on Tuesday what form of trial she chose, Guess blurted out something but was swiftly silenced by her lawyer. 3. The late 1990s, the United Nations Gang, Clayton Roueche, the elite. The United Nations Gang or Global United Nations Syndicate, GUNS, is a criminal gang active in the Vancouver, British Columbia area. The name alludes to the various ethnic origins of the members. The UN Gang was formed in Abbotsford in the late 1990s by a group of high school friends from around the Fraser Valley. What began as a loose-knit group of Abbotsford thugs linked to Asian organized crime grew quickly over the years. Today, the UN Gang is a structured organization that imports and distributes BC bud and cocaine. They also dabble in weapons trafficking, marijuana grow-ops, cross-border trafficking, extortion, kidnappings, and the sale of heroin and crystal meth. Police have estimated the UN Gang to have 500,000 core members in the lower mainland area of BC. The alleged leader of the United Nations Gang is Clayton Roueche. Roueche grew up in Chilliwack, BC, and later moved out to Abbotsford, BC, and then on to Vancouver. Roueche had an obsession with martial arts and worked his way onto the drug scene at a young age. It is rumored that the UN Gang has a hierarchy similar to that of the Italian Mafia, yet takes inspiration from Chinese triad gangs in their initiation techniques. Once potential members have proven themselves adequately, they are made during a ceremony in which they swear to uphold the laws of the gang. Some examples are, no hard drugs, no police informing, no committing a sexual act with a sworn brother's spouse, no stealing from or ripping off sworn brothers. All these examples are believed to be punishable by death. June 1996, Siamak Zahidi suffers multiple gunshot wounds in gangland-related incident while at home. October 21, 1996. Bindy Johul challenges Lotus Gang by kidnapping younger brother of gang member to collect on a drug debt. November 30, 1996. Mani Razai, alleged member of Persian Posse Gang, shot in head while sitting in car outside rave dance and left paralyzed. Bal Butta, born on December 11, 1975, the second of 3 brothers, thinks he was attracted to the criminal world because he struggled with attention deficit disorder in school and was often bullied and teased. He also wore a turban and other kids would taunt him in the schoolyard, calling him names. Bal compensated by getting tough, instilling fear in others around him. I learned how to give attention to people by giving them fear. And then with fear, they would listen to me. Whatever I would tell them to do, they would do, he said. First came fights, then knives, guns, and full-fledged assaults. He was charged and convicted, with an associate, of extortion, kidnapping and unlawful confinement, and did stints in youth detention and a wilderness program, but ran away. He grew up in Richmond, and was involved in petty crime as a teenager, but his criminal connections became much more serious after a chance meeting with a brutal crime boss early 1997, when Bal became a cellmate of Bindy Johul, beginning his dangerous association with the notorious cocaine dealer, having been acquitted in 1995 of charges in December 1996 with kidnapping the high-profile murders of rival gang leaders, brothers Ron and Jimmy Dosanjh. Before, when I was in jail with Bindy, Bindy told me, "You are going to be the one underneath me. You listen to me. If you take care of things at your end, I'll be happy with you, brother. If you fuck me over, I'll kill you, right?" Bal. In jail, Bal pledged his allegiance to Bindy Johul. We became, fully, brothers. When Bindy got out, that's when we started going out clubbing, beating up people, extortion, Butta said. Johul took him, then just 150 pounds, to the gym regularly and gave him steroids. He packed on 100 pounds, I could knock anybody down, you know what I mean. January 19, 1997. Amarjit Singh Dile, 31, is gunned down as he leaves the Marpole Community Centre in Vancouver after a late-night floor hockey game. Bal Butta says, Johul orders the fatal hit. February 20, 1997. Mohammed Murhadi shot thrice at point-blank range at the famous Player Theatre complex while sitting next to girlfriend watching Donnie Brasco. Reports claim the Lotus Gang offered $65,000 for the killing. For a Guess first hearing, no remorse. Guess had a preliminary hearing in April 1997, the Crown presented no evidence that Guess had deliberated improperly with regards to the defendant Peter Gill. However, the newspapers the next day reported the unsupported allegation of the prosecution that Guess had proclaimed her ex-lover's innocence throughout deliberations, but the media failed to mention that none of Guess' fellow jurors supported this claim. The court transcripts clearly show that no instruction was ever given to the jurors not to talk to the defendants, the attorneys, or the judge. The jurors were also not instructed to avoid reading media coverage of the case. The jurors assumed that these instructions were not given due to the length of the trial and the high publicity of the case. The Crown asserts that Guess should have known she was not to have contact with the principals of the case, even though the jurors were not given that instruction and even though the presiding judge unreservedly had a conversation with Guess about the trial. During the trial, preliminary arguments to determine the legality of the wiretaps are underway. In another strange and frightening twist, the judge has ruled these evidence hearings are to be kept secret from Guess and has banned her from the courtroom. Guess has been given no explanation as to why these hearings are to be kept secret from her. Secret proceedings of this type are unprecedented in the Canadian legal system. Guess' attorney has been forced to retain his own counsel, to advise him on what he is and is not allowed to disclose to his client about these secret hearings. If the wiretaps are allowed as evidence, this will set a new legal precedent that will allow the police to bug the facilities of any juror based on anonymous and unsubstantiated tips. Guess jury trial scheduled to begin on May 7, 1998. She faces 10 years in prison. 4B no remorse. On July 30, two Shug linked to the ISYF are arrested near the India-Pakistan border, near Amritsar, after infiltrating into India at the behest of Lakhbir Singh Road to reportedly assassinate the then Chief Minister of Punjab, Prakash Singh Badal. October 21, 1997. Bal Butta says, Bindy Johul ordered the murder of Gurinder Singh Kun, 24, and Kun is shot dead in Vancouver. While Kun had been hanging out with Johul in the period before his death, Johul ordered the hit because he suspected Kun was the shooter responsible for the April 1994 attempt on his life that left his innocent neighbor, Glenn Olson, dead. January 21, 1998. Chi Mah and 5 others are charged in California as being part of a major international drug trafficking ring stretching from Pakistan to Colombia. On January 21, 1998, 2 of Ranjit Singh Chi Mah's alleged associates arrived at Mohammed Yusuf Khan's hotel near LA and gave him a duffel bag containing almost $500,000 US. The group of men went to the hotel parking lot, where DEA agents had placed 5 boxes containing 104 kilograms of fake heroin and 2 of the real stuff. The 3 BC associates, David Karan Nair, Yadvinder Singh Kalu, and Mandip Dosanjh then drove off and were arrested shortly afterward, and later plead guilty. They are convicted and sentenced to 9 years. Chi Mah was arrested by the RCMP in Vancouver and began his 10-year battle to avoid a U.S. trial. In February 1998, drug cartel kingpin Ranjit Singh Chi Mah was first charged in attempt to smuggle heroin worth $4 million and 4,000 kilograms of hashish from a former Pakistani general and members of a Colombian cartel note. In the 1995 trial of 6 men accused of the gangland slayings of brothers Jim and Ron Dosanjh, Chi Mah was identified as an alleged cocaine trafficker. He was wounded by a gunshot at a Richmond nightclub. He was with his associate at the time, Robbie Candela, who was gunned down in June 2002 after a falling out with Chi Mah. In 2000, Mike Brar, Chi Mah's bodyguard, was fatally shot outside a Vancouver wedding reception, but Chi Mah was not hurt. March 6, 1998. Benji plotted the murder of Vancouver businessman Michael Singh, strangling him with his own tie before stuffing it down his throat and leaving him in the trunk of his car. Chi Mah had argued that a Pakistani named Mohammed Yusuf Khan was acting illegally as an agent of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration when he met with Chi Mah in Vancouver in April 1997 to discuss their plan to import more than 200 kilograms of heroin into North America. Chi Mah surrendered himself to the authorities and is likely to be handed over to the American Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, very soon. He was out on a bail of $4 million since November and staying at his parents' Vancouver home with his wife and young daughter. June 10, 1999. BC Supreme Court rules that before Chi Mah can face an extradition hearing, the RCMP has to disclose details of its relationship with the informant that later helped U.S. agents set up the Canadians. 4C Guess First Hearing, No Remorse. Saturday, June 20, 1998. Canada's most famous juror, Gillian Guess, was grim-faced as she faced a crush of TV cameras and newspaper photographers while leaving the Vancouver law courts on Friday after being found guilty in a landmark obstruction of justice trial. The jury deliberated for about 14 hours over 2 days before finding the 43-year-old single mother guilty of willfully attempting to obstruct the course of justice by having an affair with accused killer Peter Gill, who was on bail during his 1995 murder trial. A woman juror in the back row wiped a tear from her eye as the jury foreman announced its decision. The jurors then stood to confirm their verdict was unanimous. A friend of Guess, Mary Seppers, lost her temper in court after the verdict was announced. She stood and shouted at the prosecutor, "Take that smirk off your face, Joe Bellows. You're going to get yours." She was removed from court by deputy sheriffs. Guess, a narcissistic and self-absorbed personality, sat with a blank stare on her face, looking crushed, her mouth downturned. But there were no tears. Those came later, as she hugged her 13-year-old son, Adam, who seemed both sad and angry that the justice system might send his mother to jail for the crime, which carries a maximum penalty of 10 years in prison. Guess, who will remain on bail until she is sentenced August 20, proved to be defiant and unrepentant to the end. "I have not committed a crime," she told reporters outside the courthouse. I fell in love, nothing more. My whole life has been ruined. My whole life has been violated. She added, at no time did I obstruct justice or attempt to obstruct justice. Asked if she had any remorse for what she did, she replied, how can I show remorse for a crime I didn't commit? She did admit to feeling bad for causing great expense to taxpayers for the police investigation, which included an extensive wiretap operation, 18,000 conversations were secretly tape recorded, and the subsequent prosecution. If I could change things, I guess I would have, but you can't tell your heart how to feel. Gillian guess. Defense lawyer Peter Ritchie plans to urge the court to impose a non-custodial sentence, no jail time, on his client. He will also consider an appeal in the next few weeks, he added. Crown Prosecutor Joe Bellows told BC Supreme Court Justice Raymond Paris he will seek a period of incarceration since Guess showed no remorse for her crime. The Crown regards this crime as serious because of a number of aggravating circumstances. The prosecutor. He also noted Guess will likely profit from her unlawful act. She has been flooded with offers from Hollywood and Canadian film producers for the screen rights to her story. She has not yet signed any deals, and Ritchie has received $50,000 in legal aid for the case, which he estimated would have cost a paying client $500,000 for the 2 years of work done by himself, his colleague Marilyn Sanford, and a number of law students. Bellows told reporters outside court he felt the jury's decision maintained the integrity of the injustice system, but noted it set no legal precedents because the circumstances were so unusual. It was the first time in North America or the Commonwealth that a juror was charged with having an affair with an accused killer during a trial. The case is so unique on its fact that one hopes that it remains unique, Bellows said. Testimony at Guess' trial related how she flirted with Gill early in the murder trial, which led to a secret sexual relationship during the 6-month trial. Guess and her fellow jurors decided to acquit Gill and 5 other men accused of the first-degree murder of Ron and Jimmy Dosanjh. The brothers were gunned down execution-style in 1994 during a cocaine turf war on Vancouver streets. The Crown is appealing the acquittals of Gill and 3 other accused, including notorious Vancouver cocaine dealer Bindy Johul, who faces trial next year on an unrelated extortion and kidnapping case involving the brother of a Lotus gang member. July 1998. 5. The Indo-Canadian Mafia Baljit said Bindy Johul ordered him to arrange the July 1998 Vancouver murder of Binus News Mackenzie and the unsuccessful October 1998 attempt on the life of Johul associate Peter Gill. I didn't want to do this job that Bindy gave me to do. July 1, 1998. Baljit says he arranged for the murder of Binus News Mackenzie on Johul's orders. Johul claimed Mackenzie had drugs in the house. Baljit thinks Johul was really fighting with Mackenzie over a girlfriend. Bindy Johul built a multifaceted criminal business, in which Baljit and associate Roman Danny Mann had major roles. Baljit said Mann was in charge of about 15 men who handled the drug trafficking wing of the business and paid Johul tens of thousands of dollars each month. Baljit had a 20-person crew involved in a variety of mafia-like crimes, and Bindy would get a piece of the action off any operations we would do. I'm talking about stealing loads of lumber, computers, racketeering, he said. Some of the ventures were surprisingly creative. Note: as of 2006, the population of Surrey is 394,976, a 13.6% increase from the 2001 population. The foreign-born population is 150,235, constituting 30.28% of the city's population. Visible minorities number 181,005 or 46.1% of the population, while Aboriginals constitute 1.9% of the population, 27.5% South Asian and 19.2% Sikh. Surrey is projected to surpass the city of Vancouver as the most populous city in BC by 2020. Baljit knew many truckers in Surrey willing to participate in inside rip-offs, in which they would claim their cargo had been stolen so that Baljit could sell it on the street. I would get about 15 to 20 grand off each truckload. We would get 3 loads a month, he said. Another scheme involved buying totaled luxury cars from the US and bringing them across the border. Battur's crew would take them to be crushed, but not before removing the ignition and vehicle registration number. He would then get one of the guys to go and steal a car like that, change the ignition, change the number, and we would sell it at the auction. We would spend about $2,000 a car and we would sell it for about $15,000 to $16,000. That was a really good network we had going there. Battur said the Bindy Johul empire grew from earnings of about $500,000 in its first year as a gang to about $3 to $4 million a year when Battur ordered Johul's murder. We were the Indo-Canadian Mafia. That's what we called ourselves. One of the branches of the business was the elite, a hit squad, which would get between $15,000 and $20,000 a killing, Battur said. Those guys were murder for hire. 5 members. Bindy was in charge of that, he said. Whoever Bindy wanted murdered, they would go do it. Murder for hire. In the mid-1990s, Bindy Johul founded a shadowy 5-member hit squads called the Elite, which Battur said were responsible for 25 to 30 murders. Bindy Johul controlled the Elite, but would pass that control to Battur and others at various times, he said, refusing to name members. Crime family unravels. By the summer and fall of 1998, Bindy Johul was floundering. He ripped off some of his own associates and people were losing confidence in him, including Battur. But one incident Battur witnessed shocked him so much, he realized he would have to kill Johul. Battur, his brother Kelly, a friend named Shankar, 19, and a few others went out clubbing on September 19, 1998. After several drinks, Shankar decided to call Johul on his cell phone to get him to party, and Bindy says, "I am tired, man, I don't want to go," Battur recalled. He said, Shankar, who was extremely drunk, started razzying Johul, calling him an idiot and a baby and swearing at him for staying home. And Bindy goes, "Watch your language, don't say these things to me." Bindy took it to heart. When Battur and his crew returned home in a truck about 3 a.m., Johul was waiting for them with Roman man. Battur knew there would be trouble. Derek Chand Shankar. 19 September 1998. Johul associate Derek Chand Shankar is found shot to death under the Queensborough Bridge in New Westminster. Battur says he witnessed Johul shoot Shankar after Shankar insulted the crime boss earlier in the evening. Johul asked where Shankar was and was told he was sleeping in the truck. Battur said Johul asked him to go for a drive and he jumped in the truck. "I was shooting the shit with him. I said, these guys didn't mean it. Just let these guys go," and he drove me underneath the Queensborough Bridge, Battur recalled. He said he woke up Derek Shankar and suggested the two of them leave quickly. First, they went to relieve themselves. All of a sudden I hear a big noise and I turn around and there is Derek Shankar going down. Bindy shot him. Bindy looks at me, I had my piece, I'm thinking, hey, should I pull my piece on him, and I thought, no, that's too quick. I was about to jump in the truck and he says, no, help me dump him in the water. So I chucked him in the water. Derek Shankar, you've got to understand, I have known that guy for a long time. He was from Richmond. He was one of the Richmond boys. So I saw Bindy Johul kill him. We chucked him in the water. We chucked the gun off the Queensborough Bridge. The stunning murder led to Johul's downfall, Battur said. When Derek Shankar went down, Bindy's whole brigade went down, you know what I mean. He took down one of the best kids. He was a guy who was a party animal with us. But he was a legit kid. He never fucked around. October 7, 1998. Drug dealer Vikesh Chand, 26, is shot dead outside Rags to Riches motorcars in Burnaby. Battur says he drove Bindy Johul and Roman, Danny, man to the scene shortly after the killing because he was shocked by his friend Chan's death, but that Johul had nothing to do with the hit. October 25, 1998. Balbutta says he arranged for the hitman who went to kill former Johul associate Peter Gill as he left for the annual Bikers Toy Run. He says Johul ordered the hit, but that the gunman's semi-automatic jammed and Gill escaped. 6. Tara Singh Hare, martyr. November 18, 1998. Tara Singh Hare was the first journalist to be killed in Canada because of his work. His reporting frequently landed him on a hit list with Sikh hardliners. He was killed in his own garage as he was getting out of his car. If they get me, they get me. There's nothing I can do and I'm not going to stop my work. Tara Singh Hare. On November 18, 1998, moderate Sikh Tara Singh Hare, founder of North America's oldest and largest Punjabi-language newspaper, was shot dead in his Surrey garage. Shahid Tara Singh Hare was born in Padai Jajir, a small village in Punjab, India, on November 15, 1936. After immigrating to Canada in 1970, he worked as a miner, teacher, and truck driver, among other jobs, before he founded the Indo-Canadian Times in the Vancouver area in 1978. He received numerous awards, including the Order of Canada, the country's highest civilian award. He campaigned tirelessly for freedom of expression, as well as tolerance, peace, and greater understanding between ethnic and cultural groups, and against violence and extremism. Hare was a Sikh who supported the moderate side in a factional battle that has raged for years in British Columbia. His target was violent Sikh fundamentalists seeking the leadership of the Western Province's 70,000 Sikhs and an independent Sikh homeland in India. Tara Singh Hare was no stranger to controversy, a vociferous opponent of the extreme methods used by some Sikhs and the radicalism prevalent in his Surrey, British Columbia community. Mr. Hare continued to publish his paper despite numerous threats to silence him. In 1986, a bomb was discovered outside his printing plant. In 1988, he was left paralyzed from the waist down, the target of a religious zealot teenage assassin who was later convicted and sentenced to 14 years in jail before being deported. Many believe the assassin did not act alone, but was part of a group of militants offended by the publisher's condemnation of the Air India bombing. Note: police are still trying to solve the bombing that same year of an Air India jet after it took off from Canada bound for Bombay, Air India Flight 182, which killed 329 people. Mr. Hare believed the attack was the work of militant Sikhs allied with the Khalistan movement to establish a Sikh homeland outside of Hindu-dominated India. The threats to his life eventually began to ebb after the 1988 shooting, only to begin to flow again with Mr. Hare's fiery condemnation of his excommunication in articles he wrote in the Indo-Canadian Times. Similar violence has struck many others in the divided community, including Dosanjh, who was attacked with an iron bar in 1985 for criticizing the violent pursuit of an independent Khalistan. More recently, Mr. Hare and others defied an edict from Sikh High Priest Jathedar Bhai Ranjit Singh, head of the Akal Takht, the supreme religious body of Sikhs, which banned the use of temple furniture. As a result of their defiance, Mr. Hare and the others were quickly excommunicated from the Ross Street Temple in April of this year. The edict has deeply divided the Sikh community and has been the catalyst for a wave of violence. The sheer cowardice of the act was chilling. Someone was waiting in the dusk that comes early this time of year for Hare to return to his home in Surrey, BC, at the end of the workday. As Hare struggled to move himself from the driver's seat of his car to his wheelchair, the assailant fired at the crippled man's head, killing him instantly. The deed galvanized British Columbia Sikh community, which has been dogged by violence for a decade and a half. Hare was married with 3 daughters, 1 son, and 18 grandchildren. The Vancouver Sun Daily reported that he had some 200 relatives across British Columbia. Hare's family denounced the killers, in the words of daughter-in-law Isabel Hare, not only for killing an honorable Canadian, a journalist, father, and grandfather, but also for branding the Indo-Canadian community as violent terrorists. While RCMP homicide investigators at least publicly kept their minds open, the nearly universal judgment among British Columbia's 150,000 Sikhs was that Hare had died for his politics, and for freedom of speech. The 62-year-old publisher and editor was a widely respected man in the prosperous and increasingly influential Sikh community. But he was an outspoken critic of extreme fundamentalists within the 500-year-old faith who endorse violence in the pursuit of religious and political goals, mainly the creation of an independent state of Khalistan in what is now India's Punjab. But despite both Hare's editorials in the Indo-Canadian Times, and the increasingly establishment look of the Sikh mainstream in BC, a population that includes 3 provincial and 1 federal cabinet minister, blood continues to stain relations between Sikh moderates and extremists. Hare's slaying brought outrage from BC Premier Glenn Clark and personal pain to Attorney General Johul Dosanjh, a fellow Sikh and friend of Hare. But the merciless killing may yet have an impact that Hare's editorials could not, in the view of some Sikhs, if it serves finally to exhaust the community's patience with the excesses of its extremists. Last year, a brawl on temple grounds in Surrey between moderates and extreme fundamentalists who disagreed on whether tables and chairs should be used for the faith's communal dinners resulted in 4 stabbings. In March this year, the former president of a second temple had the windows of his home shot out. At a third temple, in Abbotsford in August, 50 people waded into a rumble between factions divided over whether shoes should be worn inside the building. Passions intensified in recent weeks, as rival slates of candidates representing moderate and conservative factions campaigned for executive offices in elections at temples in Abbotsford and Vancouver. The votes carry the key to substantial revenues, as well as control of large temple complexes. In the wake of Hare's killing, some Sikh moderates said his death was not entirely unexpected. There have been rumors of hitmen in town for weeks, said former temple president Bikar Singh Gillian, who was attacked himself in 1991. Last July, rumors also circulated about a hit list of 7 or 8 moderates earmarked for death, when an annual religious parade was cancelled over police concerns about violence. Fundamentalists in the temple elections speculated that Hare's murder might have been a calculated provocation. For all we know, it was one of the so-called moderates, suggested Surdaf Singh Jaitana, a conservative election worker. The most remarkable scenario was advanced by an Ontario-based commentator on Sikh affairs, T. Sher Singh. In interviews, he accused Indian intelligence agencies of funneling money through that country's consulate in Vancouver to a group of militants, in a bid to discredit the Sikh community in Canada. India's Consul General in Vancouver, Adish Sinha, dismissed the idea. I can say categorically, there is no truth in that kind of allegation. Hare's family says there is no mystery, however, about the roots of the violence or the responsibility for their father's death. It's the same people who were involved in the chair issue, asserted Hare's son David, who rushed a special edition of the Indo-Canadian Times into print the night of his father's death. It's the same people who were involved in Air India, he added. The key people hiding in the back are the same. Moderate Sikh leaders insist the police know the identities of people they suspect of sponsoring the violence, but investigators reply that, until now, witnesses have been slow to come forward with useful evidence. I'm told that in India, you just don't talk to the police, laments Surrey RCMP Constant Grant learned. As a result, you don't get people coming forward. Isabel Hare believes her father-in-law's death may be the catalyst police need. People who would not speak out before are coming forward and talking. That is quite a significant step. The impact of Hare's death may become clearer this week, after a temple in Abbotsford counts the ballots in a court-ordered executive election. Another election is set for a Vancouver temple in December. A better testimony to his lifelong fight for freedom of speech will come, however, when those who know the identity of Hare's killer break their silence. Hare's son, Sukhdev Hare, returned to the newspaper office after the shooting to add a special report on the murder, saying it was important to continue with the paper despite the murder because his father had fought for press freedom in Canada. Sukdev Hare reportedly believes his father's killer was trying to frighten people prior to upcoming Sikh temple elections in Vancouver and Abbotsford because they feared moderates would win. Sikh moderates and friends of Hare who believe Hare should have been offered full police protection based on repeated threats to his life have said police ignored the threats and violence of fundamentalists in the region. They point to the unsolved Air India bombing and other acts of violence and intimidation as proof that their community has been largely ignored by the police. Note: in November 1999, the Canadian Journalists for Free Expression inaugurated the CJFE Tara Singh Hare Memorial Award in Hare's honor. At the awards dinner, Hare's son, David, who has continued to put out the paper, said that his father's death demonstrates that attacks on the press can take place even in Canada and that his dedication should give courage to all journalists who are persecuted for their work. 7. The Hells Angels. November 29, 1998. Johul friend Roman, Danny, man, 22, is found murdered in New Westminster. Butta says Johul killed man because man wanted out of the criminal organization. Derek Shankar had been extremely close to Kelly Butta, who was devastated at the news of his death. My brother took it hard and said, "I can't believe you were there and you didn't do anything. You gotta understand, the guy was watching me like a hawk. If I made one move, I know he would have pulled a gun on me." Bal Butta promised his brother he would get revenge. "Don't worry, I'll take care of it soon." In the meantime, Bindy Johul got into a dispute with the Hells Angels. He visited their Vancouver clubhouse with Bal Butta and Roman, Danny, man, 22, one fall evening after getting invited by a member he met at a downtown club. When the trio arrived, Johul was denied entry, which angered his underlings, especially Bal Butta. "I got choked. I said, Bindy, look, I told you not to go there and now these guys have made us look like fools. They are telling us not to go in there. I pulled out my gun and said shoot the mother in the leg. I was drunk myself," Bal Butta recalled. He said Johul was cool about the dispute but that Bal Butta was so angry he shot his gun in the air several times. "We got in the car and we left. These guys thought we shot at the clubhouse. So what happened in the news, they said, Hells Angels clubhouse got shot up, linked to Bindy Johul or something. I thought that's hilarious, he never did that. It was me," said Bal Butta. "That brought heat for Bindy and we started breaking down. Man wanted out and told Johul he wanted to leave the criminal organization, which led to Johul punching his close associate in the face. When Bal Butta saw man's fat lip, he could also see that everything was unraveling fast. The next thing I know, the next day or 2 days later, I hear Roman man's body was found behind a warehouse and I knew right away that it was Bindy Johul. Bindy was calling my cell and saying we've got to go to Roman's funeral. We've got to find out if the HAs did this. Blame it on the HAs," he said, referring to the Hells Angels. Bal Butta was suspicious when Johul wanted to go out clubbing after leaving man's grieving family. Bal Butta told Johul, "Why the hell do I want to go clubbing when my best friend died? My other guy Derek died, and now you want to go clubbing with me." 8. Bindy Johul shot dead. For $20,000. Bal Butta reveals how he arranged the murders of Indo-Canadian rivals in a brutal, drug-fueled underworld that has claimed dozens of young lives. December 5, 1998. Johul and Bal Butta are arrested on Scott Road by Delta police after a .45 caliber handgun was found in their car. Bal Butta says the gun belonged to Johul, who he believes intended to execute him that night. December 5, 1998. Bal Butta was driving to a Surrey club with his boss when Bindy Johul pulled a 360-degree turn in the middle of Scott Road. The Delta police pulled the pair over. He pulls out a .45 caliber gun. I couldn't believe it because this guy doesn't carry. He tells me when he's going to carry a gun, Bal Butta said. It dawned on him that Johul had probably planned to execute him that night. As the police checked the car's registration, Bindy Johul asked his loyal lieutenant, Bal Butta, to hide the weapon, but the officer had already seen it and called for backup. The pair was arrested. All night he was whining, "Oh, I can't go through this again, for 8 or 9 months remand, and I won't even beat the case," Bal Butta quoted Bindy Johul as saying. Bindy Johul asked Bal Butta to say the gun was his and Butta agreed to plead guilty. It would give him a perfect alibi for Johul's murder. He would be in jail when the hit took place on December 20, 1998. December 20, 1998. Bhupinder Singh, Bindy, Johul, 27, is shot dead at Vancouver's Palladium nightclub. Bal Butta says he arranged the hit on Johul for $20,000 after the notorious cocaine dealer became reckless and started killing some of his own associates. Johul was punished for kidnapping and holding Lotus Gang leader Raymond Chan hostage at gunpoint for over 50 hours 2 years ago. Lotus Gang reportedly paid 5 kilograms of cocaine in exchange. But the kidnapping news reached the police, who slapped Johul and associates with numerous charges. If he had been convicted, Johul might have served at least 10 years in prison. The case was to go to trial in a few months. The police suspect that many of the potential witnesses were intimidated by Johul's cronies, resulting in the delay of the trial. Though Johul had announced shortly before his death he was turning away from the world of guns and drugs and was going to India to get married, to many of his admirers, who are still grieving for him and have vowed to have his death avenged, he is still a hero. Among the gangs named in police reports is Big Circle Boys, which allegedly deals with credit card fraud, cellular telephone cloning, drug smuggling, and is reportedly involved in a number of murders. According to a Canadian newspaper, one of the gang's credit card frauds led to a loss of $16 million to the banks about 2 years ago. Bal Butta said the elite was now taking orders from him because of the increasing distrust of Bindy Johul. He said he felt Johul would have killed him if he had not acted when he did. "When Bindy was getting reckless, I took over the elite. I told them to get him. I gave them $20,000 and they got Bindy in a nightclub for $20,000. The elite is still out there," Bal Butta said. "I'm still friends with them." Despite all the murders of Indo-Canadian Mafia kingpins, Bal Butta believes the problem of gangsterism in his community is increasing. All of the crew members trained by Bindy Johul and later Bal Butta have formed their own crews, creating an exponentially larger problem. Early speculation by the Vancouver Police Department and local media placed blame on the Lotus Triads for Johul's murder, as the group had put a $250,000 bounty on his head for an earlier kidnapping and extortion operation conducted by Johul against the Triads. Johul was killed on the orders of his trusted lieutenant, Bal Butta, who observed that Johul was losing personal control and because of erratic behavior by the notorious cocaine dealer, including killing off a series of his own associates. Bal Butta then assumed full control of the criminal organization before becoming a 28-year-old blind quadriplegic as a result of a botched attempt on his life in 2001. "If I hadn't killed him, he would have got me. I had no choice." Bal Butta. Bindy Johul, the notorious Vancouver-based Indo-Canadian organized crime leader, was assassinated on the evening of December 20, 1998 at the Palladium nightclub in downtown Vancouver. It was the elite who Bal Butta turned to gun down Johul as he hit the dance floor at the Palladium nightclub. He sustained a single gunshot to the back of the head while in the midst of dancing club patrons. Johul had not brought his bodyguards with him to the club. January 26, 1999. Poonam Randhawa is killed a few hours after she got into a car allegedly driven by Inderjit Singh, who had stalked her for over 2 years. 20 May 1999. The body of Deepak Sodhi, 19, of Vancouver is found on a dike in Delta with gunshot wounds. Robbie Sumal remains a suspect in the murder. Bal Butta said he used the elite after he took over Bindy Johul's criminal empire. He admitted to being the middleman who arranged for the elite to kill 25-year-old Kuldip Singh on September 3, 1999. Bal Butta said the other victim in the Richmond shooting, Vikash Naidu, was not the target. 3 September, 1999. Vikash Naidu, 23, of Vancouver and Kuldeep Singh, 25, of Richmond are fatally shot at close range in the parking lot of a 7-Eleven in Richmond. Bal Butta says he was the middleman in arranging the hit on Singh, but that Naidu was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. My main goal is that things that only the rich and privileged have enjoyed until now should also be given to the poor, for example, drinking water, electricity, schools, and hospitals. Fulan Devi, Queen of the Dacoit, Bandits, 1999 interview. 9. Betty Yan and the new Chinese boat people. The BC government has taken into custody 43 unaccompanied minors who landed with the second wave of boat people headed for a life of crime. Figures show that an estimated 3% of all immigrants seek a life of crime in this country. However, the terror inflicted on the public by these is way out of proportion to their numbers. Leon Benoit, Reform's immigration critic, says, liberal-minded people often question him about why he makes such a big deal about immigrant criminals when they are relatively few in number. My answer is that 3%, through drug dealing, prostitution and violence, they do an incredible amount of damage to our society, which they don't give a damn about. According to investigators, the smuggling pipeline stretches from Vancouver to Toronto, where migrants are kept in safe houses and then taken into the United States through Indian reservations on the border. Their destination usually is New York City. About 7% of Canada's 29 million residents are of Asian origin, according to census figures. Vancouver, which is 25% Asian, is jokingly called Hongkouver in Hong Kong. They're leaving to escape China's one-child policy. Some are Christians, and Christians are known to be persecuted in Fujian province. Or they're persecuted as an ethnic minority. Wang, Chinese-Canadian Association. The Chinese government has urged Canada to return all the boat people to China, to discourage illegal immigration. There is no political persecution in China. Most of these migrants are farmers. They are not political refugees. Foreign Ministry spokesman Sun Yuxi. 7 September 1999 at a Beijing news briefing. It began with that first ship of 123 Chinese migrants, stuffed like sardines in a rusting can for a 40-day voyage from Fujian province. Right after the arrival of the second boat, identified as the Huagryong Pusan number 705, word spread that a third was on the way. New chain link fences, metal huts, and portable toilets arrived at Work Point. But the sudden wave of boat people has prompted calls for stricter enforcement against illegal immigration and tougher criteria in granting refugee status. Children's Minister Lois Boone explains in the August 18 province that the need for interpreters, teachers, and special care has made their welfare costly, about $8,200 per child, per month. Orders of Canada are damned. The snakeheads Chinese mafia involved in smuggling human cargo deserve a special honor. Betty Yan was handled out of Richmond RCMP, police sources said she was ordered deported in 2000, at which time she confessed to being a spy for the Chinese government and offered to exchange intelligence if she was allowed to stay in Canada. Betty was a player with the gangs, with us and some think with the Chinese intelligence, said an RCMP criminal intelligence analyst. Violence followed Betty Yan everywhere. Gangsters and fugitives were always close by. She was a violent woman who has been seen using her kids as human shields when she felt there was a hit on her, said a gang squad officer. The list of people who had motives for wanting her dead is long and large. Betty Yan was one of the first people in Canada to hook up with China's most wanted man, Lai Chong-sing, who has for the past decade been fighting to stay in Vancouver. Lai Chong-sing fled to Vancouver in 1999 after he was accused of running a multi-billion-dollar smuggling racket in Fujian. About 15 people have been executed in China in connection with the case, while he continues his extradition battle in BC, shortly after his arrival here, and while living in a $1 million mansion on West 57th Avenue in Vancouver with his wife and 3 kids, his Range Rover was stopped by Vancouver police for a check. Betty Yan was in the car and claimed to be his wife. according to an incident report. China was by that time sending its agents covertly into Canada to try to persuade Lai Changxin to return. Betty Yan was their go-between. February 14, 2000. The charred body of 21-year-old Rishi Singh of Vancouver is found dumped near Squamish. His burned car is later found in Surrey. Ravi Sumal and Baljit, Bas Ran are arrested but released a day later. May 13, 2000. Mike Brar, 21, acting as a bodyguard for alleged cocaine trafficker Ranjit Singh Chima, is shot to death outside a West Side Vancouver wedding attended by hundreds of people, including former Premier turned Federal Health Minister Johul Dosanjh. Sources say Ravi Kandala arranged the hit on the popular Brar. 10. Introducing the Red Scorpions and the Bacon Brothers. The Red Scorpions in British Columbia, Canada, were originally formed in a young offender facility and have been running lines, drug trafficking operations, in the suburbs of Vancouver since 2000, as the Red Scorpions continued to grow, with splinter groups from other gangs joining them. Suspects in multiple other unsolved Metro Vancouver murders, the Red Scorpions are identified by Rs tattoos on their arms and necks and come from a multicultural background, as the Red Scorpions consider race secondary to loyalty and respect. The increasing number of well-publicized incidents of Red Scorpions gang violence in the Vancouver area is in part due to their bitter rivalry with the United Nations gang. The Red Scorpions' United Nations rivalry became especially bitter after the infamous Bacon brothers left the UN to join forces with the Red Scorpions. The Bacon brothers, Jonathan, Jared, and Jamie, a trio of alleged Red Scorpions gang members suspected of multiple firearms and drug trafficking charges and implicated in a rash of homicides that have taken place in the Fraser Valley and Greater Vancouver area, and were allegedly behind some of the bloodiest shootings in the region. The killing of 6 people in a Whaley condominium in 2007. Note: they are under police protection, and have filed a complaint against the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, RCMP. On April 3, 2009, Jamie Bacon was arrested by the RCMP Emergency Response Team for his alleged involvement in the October 19, 2007 slayings of the Surrey Six, which included 2 innocent victims, Chris Moen and Ed Schellenberg, at the Balmoral Tower high-rise building in Surrey, BC, Canada. This development occurred after an associate of the Bacon brothers, Dennis Karbovanik, pleaded guilty to his participation in the slayings. Also note: Dennis Karbovanik pleaded guilty to 3 of the 6 killings in April 2009. Karbovanik was the target of a gangland hit on New Year's Eve but, thanks to his Kevlar body armor, survived. Port Moody police issued a public safety warning after he moved into the area. He is currently facing several weapons-related charges. In 2007, his close friend Jonathan Bacon turned over 114 sticks of stolen dynamite, a grenade, 7 handguns, 2 shotguns, a file, and an Uzi submachine gun to Abbotsford police as part of a plea bargain for Karbovanik. On April 3, 2009, Karbovanik pled guilty to the slaying of 3 of the 6 killed in the Surrey high-rise slayings of October 19, 2007. After turning himself in, Karbovanik was served reduced charges in return for turning Crown witness against the Bacon brothers. Originally the UN gang was primarily fighting with the Hells Angels, with whom they had a famous run-in, in 2000, which became known as World War III. At the Animals nightclub in Abbotsford, BC, the UN gang members battled the bikers and beat up the police on the way out. The Red Scorpion Gang, too, was founded in 2000 by a number of teens in a youth detention center. It has evolved as a mid-level gang running crack cocaine lines across Metro Vancouver. Red Scorpions believe race is secondary to loyalty and respect, and they cultivate a reputation of showing no mercy to their enemies. Epilogue. Thus ends the 20th century above the 49th parallel in Hollywood North. May 13, 2000. Chima attends a West Side Vancouver wedding along with his bodyguard Mike Brar, and Brar ends up being gunned down outside by a rival gang. The murder remains unsolved. Then, on May 30, 2000, Chima is charged with assault and threatening in connection with an incident in a Burnaby gym, but the charges are later stayed. In July of 2000, the Special Immigration Appeals Committee, SIAC, in the UK declares that two ISYF members, Mukhtar Singh and Paramjit Singh, are a threat to Britain's national security. July 27, 2000. Gurinder Singh Johul, 22, is shot to death in Port Coquitlam. His brother Bobby Johul, 24, is wounded. Bobby is a former associate of Gurinder Khan, killed in 1997. August 4, 2000. Sanjeev Gill is shot and wounded outside Bar None, in downtown Vancouver. August 25, 2000. Manmohan Singh Tiwana, 26, is found shot in the head in his car in Surrey. Sources say Tiwana was selling cocaine when a customer decided to steal a kilo and murdered Tiwana in the process. 9 September 2000. Parmjit Singh Gill, 20, of Burnaby and 26-year-old Roueche Sumal of Vancouver are shot and wounded in an exchange of gunfire outside Sumal's family home on East 59th. Sumal's brother Robbie believed the shooters were Harjay Gaman, killed in 2004, Gurpreet Sohi, shot a week later by Sumal and admitted gangster Mindy Bander. 14 September 2000. Suspected drug dealer Gurpreet Singh Sohi, 20, is shot to death in Delta. 3 of his former associates, Robbie Sumal, Gaji Man, and Hardip Uppal, are later convicted. In 2000, Sukhvinder Biki Dosanjh was charged and later convicted of possession of a loaded weapon. Another weapons charge late in 2002 was stayed. A year later, he pled guilty to kidnapping and assault and served jail time. According to the 2001 federal census, religion data from the 2006 census are not yet available. There are 330,000 Jews in Canada and 580,000 Muslims. Sikhs number 278,000. In BC, it's the Vietnamese, Sikhs, and Russians killing each other off over the drug trade. The Russian gangs operating in Canada are really ruthless sorts, cold-blooded types who will eliminate anyone who is in competition for their drug trade, and in Toronto, it's the Jamaicans. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Note. Tamil gang wars in Toronto. In 2005 the Canadian Sikhs have the most political influence out of all the Desi groups in the country, followed by the Tamil. These two along with the occasional crazy Pakistani guy account for most of the violent Desi crime in the country. Some messed up shit, killings, revenge attacks, assassination of rivals. The Gujas, Bengalis, and to a lesser extent the Pakistanis tend to be rich. It's not only Canada but in Kenya too. There are these 3 Ramgarhia Sikh brothers known as the Nairobi Trio. The CBI has been looking for them for years. They have been involved in countless killings and smuggling cases. The funny thing is whenever their names came in the papers it was never mentioned whether they were really behind the trouble. A lot of Punjabis sympathize with these guys and they walk in the streets like nobody fucking cares.